Welcome to Curell Case Files, a series where true crime meets cutting-edge forensics. These are the cases where silence was shattered by science, where every clue meant something, and where the dead still speak, through data, DNA, and the relentless pursuit of truth. In the first case, DNA evidence from a single tooth cracks a decades-old cold case. For nearly 40 years, the only clue in the disappearance of 19-year-old Sarah Kelton was a tooth. It had been found by a roadside in rural Montana in 1982. No body, no blood, no matching records. Back then, DNA forensics were barely in their infancy. The tooth was cataloged, bagged, and boxed away in an evidence locker marked unsolved. That should have been the end. But in 2021, a cold case unit launched a statewide initiative to revisit unsolved files using new forensic tools. A single technician opened that old evidence box and saw potential in what others had written off. She sent the tooth for mitochondrial DNA testing, a method that uses maternal lineage to trace ancestry, even in degraded samples. The results lit up a genealogical database. Within weeks, forensic genealogists used family tree reconstruction to identify a match, a woman in Oregon who had uploaded her DNA to help locate a distant cousin. She had no idea her sister Sarah had been declared a missing person 4 decades ago. Their family had been torn apart by adoption and time. That connection reopened the investigation and pointed the spotlight at a former family acquaintance, a man now in his 70s who had lived near the roadside where the tooth was found. Police uncovered old records, a traffic ticket, a missing vehicle report, and a sealed complaint from a woman who had once accused him of assault, though the charges were dropped. When confronted, the man denied everything until presented with the evidence. His DNA, left on the tooth's root when Sarah tried to fight back, had survived time and silence. He confessed, breaking down in a courtroom filled with Sarah's long-lost family. For decades, she had been a ghost, but the tooth held a voice, and DNA gave her the chance to speak one last time. Let's talk about it. Do you think we should revisit more cold cases with modern technology, even if they're decades old? What would you say to families still searching for closure? How do you feel about DNA databases being used this way? Are they a justice tool or a privacy risk? Comment below. Share your thoughts, advice, or even your own experiences. In the next case, a behavioral algorithm spots a pattern no human could see. It began with silence, no incident reports, no screaming headlines, just a pattern, one that only an algorithm saw. The city's behavioral surveillance system had flagged a man who loitered outside multiple school zones over several weeks. Each time he walked slowly, he stared too long. He avoided cameras, almost like he knew where they were. There were no direct threats, no laws broken, but something wasn't right. Forensic behavior analysts took a closer look at the flagged footage. They traced his movement paths, gaze duration, foot traffic proximity, even the length of time he spent near bike racks and exit doors. The computer didn't just see him, it predicted him. The system had quietly built a behavioral heat map. When overlaid on a map of missing child reports from the past 5 years, a horrifying connection emerged. All locations matched prior disappearances. Police launched a covert investigation. They discovered a rented storage unit under a fake name. Inside, school uniforms, wigs, a camera rig, and hundreds of labeled USB drives. Footage dating back years. Victims yet unidentified. The man was arrested at a park, watching, waiting, just like the algorithm said. What was chilling wasn't just the footage, it was how close he had been to getting away with everything. Thanks to forensic analytics, the city didn't just catch a predator. They exposed a new form of surveillance capability, one that goes beyond sight and into intention. Let's talk about it. Do you think algorithms should be used to identify behavior patterns in public surveillance? Where should the line be drawn between public safety and personal privacy? Could this kind of tech ever be used unfairly, or can it save lives when used right? Share your thoughts. What would you do with this kind of power? In the next case, ash and carbon isotopes expose arson designed to silence evidence. A printing warehouse burned to the ground in the dead of night. No alarms, no suspects, just a charred building, reduced to dust. The fire was declared accidental. An outdated breaker box, perhaps. Case closed. But one forensic chemist saw something in the ashes that others didn't. In a back corner of the ruins, deep in the debris, she found flakes of white ash that didn't belong. When analyzed, the carbon isotope signature didn't match common paper or wood pulp. It matched a specific solvent-based ink used in high-security printing. Why would high-security ink be in a defunct warehouse? The answer came buried under layers of fire-damaged debris, melted remnants of metal printing plates, fragments of fake currency, and a safe so scorched that only the hinges remained. Inside that safe, once reconstructed, were fragments of ledgers, names, account numbers, and a partial stamp from an international bank. This wasn't a random fire, it was a purge. The building's former owner had sold the company years earlier, but police discovered he had returned the week before the fire. A toll booth camera caught his car near the site that night. And his phone? Off, he claimed, though cell tower records said otherwise. Faced with mounting evidence, he confessed. He had stored the forged documents there, thinking the old warehouse would be forgotten. But a whistleblower threatened to come forward, and he panicked. He thought fire would erase everything. What he didn't count on was the science hidden in soot. This wasn't just arson, it was destruction of truth. And forensics brought it back to light. Let's talk about it. Should arson cases be automatically reopened when new forensic techniques become available? What does this case say about how easily physical evidence can be hidden or recovered? If you were on the jury, what would you want to see to be convinced? Drop your thoughts. This one raises big questions about motive, legacy, and truth in the ashes. In the next case, metal flakes in bone marrow unlock a journalist's hidden murder. The bones were found during construction on the edge of a gentrifying neighborhood, an unmarked grave deep beneath an old foundation. No clothing, no ID, just skeletal remains curled in a fetal position, long forgotten beneath concrete. Forensic anthropologists noted blunt force trauma to the skull and a clean break to the ribs, but nothing conclusive. Then, in the lab, something unexpected emerged. Inside the marrow, tiny metallic flecks, invisible to the naked eye. A forensic metallurgist was called in. Under scanning electron microscopy, the flakes were identified as vintage typewriter alloy, specifically the rare nickel-tin blend used in late 1950s Royal brand keys. Why would metal from a typewriter be embedded in someone's bones? It turned out the victim had been bludgeoned with a typewriter. That detail didn't narrow the list much, until an intern at a nearby newspaper stumbled across an archived article from 1963. It was a draft story, never published, written by an investigative reporter named Lena Harrow. She'd been looking into corruption in the local housing authority. Lena disappeared weeks later. No body was ever found. But the typewriter she used every day? Still preserved in a glass case at the newspaper's office. When forensic analysts tested the machine's keys, they found the exact same alloy mix as the flakes in the bones. The final blow came from a tip-off. An old employee who recalled a heated argument between Lena and a city official days before she vanished. Confronted with the science and the forgotten article, the man confessed. He'd killed her in a rage and buried her under the project he'd later profit from. Justice came 60 years late, but it came. The skeleton didn't speak, but the code was written in the bones. Let's talk about it. What other stories might have been silenced in the past, long before digital backups? How important is it for journalists and whistleblowers to have forensic protection in place? Would you trust a story based on scientific evidence from bones and old machines? Let's discuss. Truth doesn't fade, it just waits to be rediscovered. In the next case, a whistleblower's corrupted hard drive reveals digital warfare. The envelope was plain, no return address, no markings. Inside was a USB drive labeled simply Medusa. The journalist who received it had seen plenty of leaks before, but this one was different. The drive appeared blank, but a single hex editor scan revealed traces of deleted files, too deliberate to be accidental. With permission, a forensic data recovery lab stepped in. They reconstructed dozens of files, each containing fragments of scripts, metadata logs, and behavioral command trees. What emerged was chilling. Project Medusa wasn't fiction. It was real. A military-grade influence program designed to manipulate public discourse by injecting curated content into targeted social media feeds. It mimicked human behavior, created lifelike personas, and used emotional AI to predict reactions. It was originally designed for international counterterrorism, but someone had deployed it at home. The forensic trail pointed to a private cybersecurity contractor with deep ties to several government agencies. Payment logs, scrubbed, then recovered, showed contracts issued under black budget initiatives. But the smoking gun? A training protocol file recovered from the USB drive's Slack space. It included thousands of synthetic social media profiles, some of which were still active, arguing politics, pushing protests, even organizing local events. The whistleblower, later identified as a data engineer who vanished months earlier, had tried to sound the alarm before disappearing. His final message was encoded in one of the corrupted training files. Don't believe the faces. They're not real. Congress launched an inquiry. The program was officially shut down. But many wonder whether Medusa was ever really decommissioned or just renamed. Because once artificial influence takes root, how do we tell what's real? Let's talk about it. Should governments or private companies ever have the power to influence public opinion with AI? How do we safeguard truth in a digital world shaped by algorithms? If someone tried to expose a program like this today, would they be believed? We want to hear your thoughts. What would you do with the Medusa file?